Shalom. All praises to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, whom rule and teach well, who taught us his truth. This is your brother Yashamai from the GMS Atlantic Camp. Continuing on in Daniel, the 11th chapter. We left off in the previous video. We left off on verse 19, which talks about the death of Antiochus the third, also known as Antiochus the third, the Great. Now we are going to pick up, and we'll probably go down from verse 20 down to verse 30, and these verses will go into the ascension and the life of Antiochus the fourth, Epiphanes. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, and this again, this is the overview as has been taught to us by our elders and apostles on down of GMS who have the 100% truth. So verse 20, it says, so again, Antiochus the third is dead. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. So one thing that I noticed on this one here, that on this image that I had used on the previous videos, is it jumps from Antiochus the third and it goes straight to Antiochus the fourth, Epiphanes, which I can understand it because he's got a huge part in history. But when we read verse 20, it doesn't go. The throne didn't go from Antiochus the third straight to Antiochus the fourth. Antiochus the third actually had two more sons. Well, no, he had another son named Seleucus the fourth, Philopator, and so he actually inherited the throne after the death of his father, and he would go on to rule for about 8 years. During the time of the death of Antiochus the third, Antiochus the fourth, Epiphanes, was being held hostage in the Roman Empire, and what would end up happening is when the subservient states, when the states that were subservient to the Roman Empire, what would end up happening is the Romans, they would basically cut their army, and like for example, let me see, Romans, I forget the name of the treaty. I think it was Apmea Treaty. That may be it. Yeah, there you go, right here. The Treaty of Apamea, right? So brothers can go and look into this, but basically what the Romans did is they cut down. I think they only left Antiochus with like 3 navy boats, and they had Antiochus the third hand over one of his sons, which he chose to be Antiochus the fourth, Epiphanes. So this was just the way that business was done. The Romans would raise up the next ruler, and so basically they would teach them their ways, and so they would then install this ruler over their subservient states, and basically that's how they would control that state through a puppet governor, which same thing that America does today. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9. So let's go ahead and get back into it. It says, verse 20 says, then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes. Now we can understand why it says a raiser of taxes. Why? Because being subservient to the Roman Empire, Seleucus the fourth, Philopator, would raise taxes because he had taxes to pay to the Romans, and if you didn't pay those taxes, you'd be killed, and then they would set somebody else up. All right, that's again the way that business was done, and it's the way that business is done today. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9. So the raiser of taxes, it says that he shall be destroyed neither in anger nor in battle. And so how was he destroyed? I got it pulled up in 2 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. So it is told to the king, right here it says, it was told to the king here in verse 6. I'm not going to read it for the sake of time. This is 2 Maccabees 3, starting at verse, really starting from the top. So Seleucus the fourth, Philopator, hears about all the gold in the temple in Jerusalem, and so he ends up sending Heliodorus down there to sack the temple. And brothers know the story. When he gets there, he gets his ass beat by scary apparitions, right? And then what ends up happening is Ananias, the high priest, he ends up praying for him, and he survives. And Heliodorus goes back, and he tells Seleucus that, hey man, if you're gonna send somebody back there, send somebody that you don't like. So Heliodorus would go on to take out Seleucus the Fourth. Okay. Matter of fact, let's go back here to the scriptures. So verse 20 says, yeah. So within a few days, because he only reigned for 8 years, he says he shall be destroyed neither in anger nor in battle, because Heliodorus, took him out. Let's get to verse 21. It says, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Now, who is this vile person? This vile person would be Antiochus the Fourth. All right, because by now Antiochus the Fourth has been set free from the Roman captivity, because his brother ascended onto the throne. He's in Athens when he hears about the death of Seleucus the Fourth, his brother. So he goes from Athens, and he shows up. He shows up in Syria, and he ends up taking out Heliodorus. Okay, now Seleucus the Fourth Philopator had a son, all right, by the name of Demetrius, and Demetrius was the one that was supposed to inherit the throne. Matter of fact, you can read about it here in, I believe, yeah, right here. If you go into Wikipedia, Antiochus Epiphanes, it talks about the true heir should have been Seleucus' son, Demetrius the First. Okay, so now let's go back here to the scripture. It says a vile person. Matter of fact, we got a precept for that as well. This is First Maccabees 1 verse 10. It says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, being Antiochus the third, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So even in the First Maccabees, 1 verse 10, it calls him wicked, which is synonymous with vile. Okay, so that's Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes. It says, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. Why? Because it wasn't supposed to go to him. It was supposed to go to Demetrius. Continuing on, it says, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And even that's mentioned in the history here. It says, so when he gets when Antiochus the Fourth Epiphany goes to Syria, at this time Demetrius, who should be the heir, is too young to sit on the throne. So basically he makes himself co-ruler alongside Demetrius. He tells the people, I'll be king until Demetrius gets old enough to sit on the throne. And when the scriptures talk about he shall come peaceably and obtain by flatteries, it says right here, Antiochus seized the opportunity to declare himself king, successfully rallying enough of the Greek ruling class in Antioch to support his claim. So when the scripture said in verse 21 that he would come in by flatteries, he flattered the elites of the Greeks, and then later on he would go on to take out Demetrius, right, so that he would consolidate his authority in the Greek Empire. Okay, let's see here. Let's go back. Obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Okay, we got that. Verse 22, it says, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. So verse 22, matter of fact, yeah, I got the NLT here too, right? So like I keep clicking on it. It says, before him great armies will be swept away, including a covenant prince. Okay, so that the great armies goes into Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, beginning to campaign again, and trying to expand the Seleucid Empire. Um, and he put in work, man. During his time, the Seleucid Empire grew to its largest at the time. Okay, and the second part here, when the scripture says, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Now, when Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes came up, he, under his orders, he took out, he would change out the high priest. Um, he changed out Ananias, the high priest, and he replaced him with Jason. You can read about it in the book of Second Maccabees. I think I might even have Second Maccabees 4. Yeah, right here. Second Maccabees 4. We'll start at 7. It says, but after the death of Seleucus the fourth Philopator, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king, Antiochus Epiphanes, by intercession 303 score talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. So, ultimately Antiochus Epiphanes would agree to it, and he would let him set up a gym. Okay, so when the scriptures talk about um, um, but them being over, armies being swept away, and the prince of the covenant being swept away, that's going into um, Ananias, the high priest, being overthrown and then ultimately killed. Because um, Ananias, the high priest, he would, when he saw the danger coming, he fled to a town called Daphne. And while he was in Daphne, there was one of Antiochus Epiphanes. His name is Andronicus. Yeah, I believe his name was Andronicus. One of his generals, he goes and he takes out Ananias, which ultimately Andronicus would be taken out by Antiochus. But I'm straying here. Let's go back into it here. It says, verse 23 says, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. So again, this goes back to what was mentioned in verse 21. Um, Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes, growing strong with a small people. Who was that small people? The small people were the elite Greeks that he convinced to put him in a position of power. Okay, let's continue on verse 24. It says, he shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time. Let's read that in the NLT. It says, then he will stir up his courage and raise a great army against Salakia. 24. Without warning, he will enter the richest areas of the land. Then he will distribute among his followers the plunder and wealth of the rich, something his predecessors had never done. He will plot the overthrow of strongholds, but this will last only for a short while. Okay, so when when you read into Antiochus's life, matter of fact, got it pulled up here. When you read into the way that right here into his ruling style, it says, Antiochus IV cultivated a reputation as an extravagant and generous ruler. And by the way, let me stop and just remind us again, this is a vision that the prophet Daniel got, several years before this came to happen. I mean, look at the detail that Yahweh Hashem Yahushai gave the prophet Daniel, man. Even told him how he would rule. He said, man, this guy's going to enter, and, he's going to give his followers money. And that's exactly what happened, man. It says he was an extravagant and generous ruler. He scattered money to common people in the streets of Antioch. He gave unexpected gifts to people he did not know. He contributed money to temples. He did massive parades. He opened up banquets. He had the best spices, clothing, and food. He built up his armies with mercenaries, and he did all this at the cost of the Seleucid treasury. His eccentric behavior and unexpected interactions with common people, such as appearing in the public bathhouses and applying for municipal offices, led detractors to call him Epiphanes, which means the madman. Okay, and I think I got an example of that even too on. You can see when he opens it up. First Maccabees 3. Yeah, let's get down here. Um, this is we see an account of this even in the scriptures. This is Second Maccabees 3. Um, mm, 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 yeah, right here, 3:27 and 28. It says, "Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation." So this is when he begins to hear of Judas. Judas Maccabees. Says he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. Now here's where he's, it said, here's his, as we read, where he was just handing out money. It says he opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers a pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. This is crazy, man, because it's even reminiscent of what's going on today, with Donald. He's giving these people bonuses, to come against those he deems to be wrong, man. And as a Grecian soldier, man, like, can you imagine? Hey, man, getting your salary's pay in one day, for a year, and saying, hey, come to war. Again, it just goes back to what the scripture said, man. It says that he shall enter peaceably. All right. It says he shall scatter among them the prey and the spoil. We got that. Yeah, right. Because the scattering of, all the money that he was paying his soldiers, that was spoil gotten by him plundering, the areas surrounding his empire as he grew it. Okay. Continuing on, it says, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time. And when it says that even for a time, because he also ruled for a very short time. He ruled from 175 BC until 164 BC, which is only 9 years. Okay. um, and man, no, we'll just continue on. Let's go ahead. Let's go back to the scriptures here. Let's go to verse 25. It says, "And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand. For they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain." Okay, so when it talks about, verse 25 is talking about the first siege that Antiochus Epiphanes would come up against the Ptolemaic Empire. Again, the king of the north is the Seleucid Empire. The king of the south is the Ptolemaic Empire. Okay, so matter of fact, I think I got that pulled up here too. Antiochus, Antiochus right here. So he did several attacks, which we're going to get into. The first attack that he went against, going back to the scriptures, because it says right here, he shall stir up his courage against the king of the south with a great army. So the king of the south at this time was Ptolemy the Sixth Philopator. And what he ends up doing the first time he comes against him is, he gets lands. He gets part of Egypt, which is where the Ptolemaic kingdom is at. He gets Memphis, right? But he does not get Alexandria, which is the capital. Matter of fact, we can even see this being referenced in the book of First Maccabees. Where you at? First Maccabees. First Maccabees. Is it First Maccabees 116? So he made first. Oh, Salakia. I'm in First Maccabees 3. Let me go to the chapter. I'm tripping up. First Maccabees 16 here says, now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of the two realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and great navy. And again, this lines up exactly with what we're reading here. He stood up, with a great army. And, the scriptures just read off that great army: chariots, elephants, horsemen, and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, the king of Egypt. Again, this is Ptolemy the sixth Philopator. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. Okay? So the first war, Antiochus Epiphanes, he gets parts of Egypt. And during the first war, he also captures Ptolemy. He captures Ptolemy the sixth, right? Yeah, he captures Ptolemy the sixth Philopator. Okay, and he takes, again, he's taking over Memphis. So then, he kind of goes back. He chills for a bit, and while this is happening, um, the brother of the next in line, which would be Ptolemy the eighth, Euergetes, he gets crowned king in Alexandria. Now, hold on a minute, in case you're asking, well, wait a minute, why did we go from Ptolemy 6 to Ptolemy 8? The reason being is because Ptolemy 7, he was too young to take the throne at the time. So when Ptolemy the sixth Philopator was taken hostage by Antiochus the fourth, the next one in line that was at age was Ptolemy the eighth Euergetes. Okay, and by the way, too, I read here too, says, but he shall not stand. So Ptolemy the sixth Philopator, ended up losing. For they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. Verse 26 is going into how Ptolemy the sixth lost that battle. And ultimately, the way he lost that battle was because his counselors, those that sat to eat at his own table, would end up, stabbing him in the back by giving information to Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. So verse 26 is just, is telling you how Ptolemy the sixth Philopator would lose the battle. Matter of fact, in the NLT it says, his own household will cause his downfall. His army will be swept away, and many will be killed. Okay, so now we've got that. Okay, so now Antiochus goes back. He's got Memphis. He did not get Alexandria, and he's got a hostage by the name of Ptolemy the sixth Philopator. Let's go down to Shalakia. Let's go down to verse 27. It says, and both these kings' heart shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Okay, so now what's going on here is that when the scripture talks about these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, so and they shall speak lies at one table. Matter of fact, that's actually very specific. One table, Seleucus, and Ptolemy Philopator. They actually end up having a so again, one table, Seleucus, gate conflict, Seleucus found it, so to Daniel context. Let me see here. Did Seleucus sit at table with Ptolemy Philopator right here. Salagia, Seleucus, Antiochus. That's probably why the first one didn't come out, because I put up Seleucus. Context, the specific kings, the scenario. Uh, Antiochus, man. Salakia, Antiochus, Epiphanes, table, treaty, table, treaty, Ptolemy Philopator. Let's see if this pulls it up here. The table treaty. Okay, yeah. Okay, so now let's go back here. For the sake, just to keep it fresh here, it says, both of these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table. So again, Antiochus IV Epiphanes has Ptolemy VI hostage, and so Ptolemy VIII Euergetes is now king of the Ptolemaic kingdom. And so what do these two do? They both lie to each other, and Antiochus Epiphanes tells Ptolemy VI, "Hey, I'm going to help you take your brother out, and then me and you are going to be allies." Okay, and then Ptolemy VI, he says yes, but in reality, he wants to take his brother out, and then he wants to take out Antiochus. So when the scripture says both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, they were both trying to backstab each other. Okay, so furthermore it says, and they shall speak lies at one table, and that's very specific because, as we've got that pulled up here, that's the table treaty. This was like a spectacle made for the public, where they were both trying to convince each other, hey, let's do this in front of the people, and we're gonna show them that we're tight. Okay, so the table treaty involved Antiochus Epiphanes and the Ptolemaic ruler of Egypt. Six, the Philopator, captured Memphis, took control of Lower Egypt, holding the young King Ptolemy. Okay, the lies right here. Antiochus IV pretended to be a protector of his nephew, Ptolemy VI. And yes, he was his nephew because, if you remember, I believe it was Seleucus that gave his daughter, Cleopatra, to, I believe it was Ptolemy. It's one of the Ptolemies, man. With so many Ptolemies, you get confused. I mentioned it in my previous video, but yeah, there were Antiochus was the uncle of Ptolemy VI through his niece Cleopatra. So yes, as against the rival Ptolemaic faction in Alexandria by Ptolemy VIII. Ptolemy VI pretended to trust his uncle and to be allied with him. So again, it, talks about this truths being done in bad faith. All right, so let's go back to the scriptures here. Where were we at? 27. And they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So why didn't it prosper? Is because even though both of these two wanted to take each other out, what would end up happening is the two brothers would actually make up, and they would get back together under one rule. All right. And that's what the scriptures say. It shall not prosper. Both of their deceptive plans would not prosper. Let's get to verse 28. It says, then shall he return into his own land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return unto his own land. So again, Antiochus IV, he wanted Alexandria, but he only got Memphis. And even though he didn't overthrow the Ptolemaic kingdom like he wanted to by using Ptolemy VI against Ptolemy VIII, he left with riches and felt somewhat defeated. Okay, matter of fact, says and return to his own land. Okay, and then it says 28. Yeah, right. With great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. So, when the scriptures talk about his heart being against the holy covenant, you can see examples of this in First Maccabees. Again, First Maccabees 1, 20. And after Antiochus, Yeah, this is First Maccabees 1:20. It says, and after Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and proudly entered into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, the candlesticks, and the vessels thereof, and the table of the showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, the censers of gold, the veil, the crown, and the gold ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver, the gold, and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoken very proudly. Which spoken very proudly. That's reminiscent of Daniel the seventh chapter. Talks about the great horns. So whose look was more stout than the others. They're one in the same. They're Edomites, man. Which brings up the book of Obadiah. But let's continue to stay in here for the sake of covenant, because we don't want to go on a tangent here. So let me see here. It says, and he shall do, yeah, okay, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant. So we saw that, him coming against the Holy Land. And he shall do exploits. Matter of fact, it says doing much damage before continuing his journey. And doing much damage before continuing his journey. That's crazy. Because having made, let's go back to First Maccabees 1:24. It's basically synonymous. Having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. Man, these scriptures is on point, man. I mean, they always are, but it's just crazy to see how everything flows so beautiful. Let's continue on. It says verse 29. Yeah, we'll probably stop it at verse 30. It says, at the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Okay, so again, Antiochus did multiple attacks against the Seleucid Empire, and the first time, he got Memphis. Well, then he builds up his army, and he's going to come against them a second time. No, I believe it's the third time that he's going to come against them. Yeah, because the second time would be, you could count the second time with Ptolemy the Sixth, which he ended up losing because they gathered together, six and the eighth. So this would be the third time. It says, at the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Okay, so how was the former? Well, the first time he came against the Ptolemaic kingdom, he took Memphis, right? Well, this time that wouldn't be the case. And we're going to read why. Verse 30 says, for the ships of Chittim shall come against him. And therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So when he's on his way to attack the Ptolemaic kingdom, who are the ships of Chittim? In the NLT it says warships from the western coastlands. Let's go ahead and get that word Chittim in the Hebrew. And that word here is kathayam, kathayam. Okay, kathiam, which means bruisers, or a general term of islanders in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, who is this? Who was in the Mediterranean Sea? Who was the islanders? These are the Romans. Okay, so when the scriptures talk about the ships of Chittim shall come against them, that's the Romans coming against them, because the Romans had heard that he was on the way to come against the Ptolemies. And so why did the Romans not want the war? Well, Ptolemy was already a client state to the Romans. Okay, so they were getting their taxes from him. So they didn't want their money mess with. Second, they didn't want Antiochus to get the Ptolemaic kingdom and then become large, because then that would be a threat to their empire. And third, they were getting wheat from the Ptolemaics, and so yeah, they were getting meat from the Ptolemies, in by the city of Sidon, which Antiochus had taken previously, and so basically he was stepping on the Roman Empire's toes. So when he's on the way there, the and this was part of the Sixth Syrian War that I believe I mentioned it in my second video. But he meets with Marius, I believe it's Gaius, man. General Roman, uh, Gaius Scipio Siege, Gaius. No, it's not. It might be Gaius Antiochus line in the sand. Damn, that spelling is bad. Gaius Antiochus. Oh gosh, how you spell Gaius? Gaius Antiochus. Gaius Populus Lanus. There you go. So when he's on the way to, and brothers can read the history too, but um, the Romans stop him by sending Gaius Populus Lanus to meet Antiochus on the way, when Antiochus is going to fight against the Ptolemies, and he basically tells him, hey, either you stop and you turn around, or by you declaring war against the Ptolemies, you're basically declaring war against the Romans, because again, they were a subservient state, right? Basically like NATO. You attack one of us, then you attack all of us, and that's basically what the Romans told them. And so Antiochus says, well, give me a couple of days to think about it, and then this is where Gaius draws a circle around Antiochus and says, I need your answer before you walk out of this circle. Hence, that's where you get a line in the sand. And so basically, Antiochus, he gets punked by the Roman Empire. He gets his feelings hurt. And he says, all right, I'll leave. And so that's how the ships of Chittim stopped him. It says, therefore he shall be grieved, right? Because he was, he got his feelings hurt in front of his army, man. And, they all had to turn their asses around and go back home, basically. And return, and says, and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do, he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. And so he basically went back to Israel, and he took his anger out on the Israelites, man. And you can see this right here. And probably was taken away, so Princess elders mourn. Um, what was that? For the fourth? But matter of fact, we'll go ahead and get into this on the next video. But basically, he would go and cause the Southern Kingdom to stray away from the laws, which brothers are familiar. I just don't want to get into it now because I'm going to get into it with the other video. But ultimately, all the blasphemous acts that he did against the Israelites would cause the Maccabean revolt. All right, but I think that I'm in it there at verse 30. Yeah, because basically, as brothers know, those Israelites that forsook the laws, they were praised. They got a chance to get offices in just like today, man. They got a chance to be high value people in society. And those that didn't, they got martyred, man. But we'll go ahead and get into that on the next video. Hopefully this has been edifying, and until the next one, shalom.